I'm going to spend the next few minutes walking through the Leica SL2 Reporter Edition the way I would if I were sitting across from you at a coffee shop, trying to decide whether this camera is the one that will actually solve the problems you keep running into. If you've ever felt a little unsure about splurging on a full-frame mirrorless system because you're not sure how it will perform in the real world, this review is for you. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When you're looking at a high-end body like this, the first hesitation usually comes from two places: the price tag and the question of whether the tech will translate into everyday reliability. Leica's reputation for precision optics makes the SL2S sound tempting, but the real test is whether its sensor, autofocus, low-light behavior, and battery life will let you shoot the kind of work you actually need, whether that's a documentary interview, a low-light street scene, or a day-long event. I've spent the last week testing the camera in 3 distinct scenarios that map onto the 3 main groups of people who usually consider a Leica: the seasoned creator who needs a dependable workhorse, the hobbyist who wants a system that grows with them, and the beginner who's looking for something that won't leave them frustrated. First, let's talk about the sensor. The SL2S houses a 24-megapixel CMOS-BSI full-frame chip that's been tuned for both stills and video. In daylight, the colors are true to life and the dynamic range feels generous enough to rescue highlight detail in high-contrast scenes. Think a sunrise over a city skyline where the sky is bright but the foreground still has texture. In low light, the ISO range stretches to 100,000, which sounds like a number made for marketing, but I found it useful when filming a dimly lit jazz club. With the electronic shutter set to 25 frames per second, the camera handled the flicker of stage lights without banding, and the noise at ISO 12-800 was still manageable after a light lift in post. For anyone who regularly shoots in challenging lighting, documentarians, event videographers, or even hobbyists who love night photography, this sensor flexibility is a practical win. Autofocus confidence is another frequent pain point. Leica's system isn't the most talked about in forums, but the SL2S uses contrast detect AF that's been refined for speed. In my tests, it locked onto moving subjects within a second on average, and the 9 frames per second mechanical shutter gave me a short burst window where focus held steady on a cyclist passing by. It's not as aggressive as some hybrid systems that claim 30 frames per second with phase detect focus, but for the type of work Leica targets deliberate storytelling rather than split-second sports, this level of reliability feels sufficient. If you need razor-sharp focus on fast-moving action, you might still look at alternatives, but for most creators who shoot people, interviews, or slower motion, the AF will give you the confidence to keep rolling. Stabilization is built into the body, offering up to 5 stops of shake reduction. I tested it handheld with a 35mm lens while walking through a market, and the footage stayed smooth enough that I didn't have to add a gimbal for a simple run-and-talk interview. The same body-level stabilization paired with a 2435mm kit lens let me shoot handheld portraits at f/2.8 in low light without the jitter that normally forces you to mount a tripod. However, the system does have a small lag when you switch from stills to video mode, about a second before the stabilization algorithm fully engages. It's a minor inconvenience, but if you're filming fast-changing scenes, you'll want to give it a beat before you start moving the camera. One of Leica's biggest selling points is its lens ecosystem. The SL2S works with Leica mount lenses, a line that leans toward premium prime optics. The Reporter Edition ships with a 2435mm f/2.8 and a 70200mm f/2.8, both of which are excellent for documentary work. The lenses are sharp, have a pleasing rendering, and the focus ring feels tactile, small but noticeable quality when you're pulling focus manually. The downside is that the mount lens lineup is far smaller than the more ubiquitous Sony mount or Canon RF ecosystems, so if you already own a collection of lenses from another brand, you'll either need adapters, which add a layer of complexity and potential autofocus slowdown, or be prepared to invest in new glass. For a creator starting fresh, the Leica lenses can be a beautiful long-term investment, but for someone who already has a library of lenses, the ecosystem limitation is a real consideration. Menu friction is a subtle but important factor. Leica's interface is famously minimalist. The top dial changes the mode, while the rear dial scrolls through the most common settings. In practice, that means you can change ISO, aperture, and shutter speed without diving into a sea of submenus. However, the trade-off is that some advanced features like custom picture profiles for video or detailed autofocus zone selection are nested deeper and require a few more button presses than you might be used to on other brands.